Milwaukee Public Television is proud to present Next Avenue Community Conversations. Next Avenue brings baby boomers and beyond smart, useful information and compelling perspectives. Our goal is simple: to provide provocative information that makes your life more meaningful and enjoyable. Next Avenue is made possible by the Helen Bader Fund, a Bader philanthropy with a focus on Alzheimer's disease and healthier older adults. On this episode, the benefits of taking care of your body, your mind, and your spirit. How finding inner peace through mindful movements can improve the quality of your life. We are coming to you from the beautiful facilities of Slinger High School in Slinger, Wisconsin. Now here's your host, Mark Siegriest.
You know, contemporary medicine is rediscovering the power, the effective power of holistic health. It certainly has ancient roots to it, and we're talking about reaching out to one's health through mind, body, and spirit, something that we baby boomers could certainly make use of as we take better control of our daily lives, our emotions. But first of all, we have to build a tool set of sorts. We have to learn about the power of our own breath and how it could put us into a positive mode, a positive imaging mode, how it can put us in peaceful thoughts, improve our daily lives, and thereby our daily relationship with those around us. And that's the focus of tonight's community conversation. It's a pleasure to have a psychotherapist and yoga instructor, Joe Walter, with us from Slinger, Wisconsin. Let's, how about a round of applause for Joe, and thank you for being here tonight. You have a very unique practice. First of all, your studio right here in Slinger, where you invite your clients to come and experience therapy, both physically and your counseling sessions. It's a beautiful setting, and they're allowed to just look out your window and get a beautiful view of the wooded area. Tell us about that.
Well, it is a peaceful setting. I've lived in the town of Polk and in Slinger here over 30 years. As Darren said, my kids went to Slinger High School and graduated some time ago. So I've been a part of the community for a long time. I've had a psychotherapy practice in the Washington County community for 30 or 35 years. And it's maybe about 15 years ago that I began to incorporate yoga and yogic techniques into my psychotherapy practice. And having it unfold in my home just seemed to be a natural fit.
Good for you, good for you. Great practice. You're reaching out to your clients in a variety of ways, helping them to meet the challenges of numerous obstacles in their life, temporary obstacles in their life, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, or broadly speaking, stress. And we all have that in our life. It's simply a natural part of living on earth, right? There's no escaping stress. It comes in many shapes and many forms, and if it persists, of course, it can manifest in deeper ways that become, more deeply problematic for people and affect their physical health, their emotional health, and certainly then their spiritual health.
You're a busy therapist, busy professional, because in addition to your private practice, you're also teaching at the Helen Bader School of Social Welfare in Milwaukee, and you're reaching out to folks as it relates to family therapy and marriage therapy.
Yeah, I've been teaching down there and as an ad hoc faculty for a number of years now, and do a number of different workshops. Actually, in the community, the workshops in recent times has taken on more of a form of yogic interventions for the treatment of depression and anxiety and stress management.
Anxiety and depression packs a powerful punch. I mean, just to be encountering one of those conditions can be crippling to someone. But when one is encountering the combination of anxiety and depression, it can physically shut you down.
Oh, most definitely. And most often where there's depression, there's anxiety. So normally,
that's a key point.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Normally when there's depression, there's a piece of anxiety in it as well.
Okay.
The anxiety or the stress becomes literally overwhelming in people's lives and deepens the depression side of things.
And there are physical symptoms that manifest themselves when someone is especially encountering depression, stress rather, and you come up with a list. And when you read the list, it's almost like something that one would be exhibiting in an emergency room.
Well, in fact, the American Psychological Association has developed kind of a laundry list of symptoms related to stress At the top of the list, and maybe many of you present tonight have experienced this, it takes the form of headaches, muscle tension, neck pain, back pain, dry mouth. Many different kinds of difficulties manifest in the physical body as a consequence of stress.
Because the mind, the body, and the spirit are indeed connected.
Oh, indeed, they're intimately connected. The difficulty is we as human beings most typically do not want to listen to our body, right? As a matter of fact, I think most typically what people do when they feel a sensation in their body is this. They don't want to deal with it.
You turn away.
They turn away.
Why do we turn away?
Oh, I think because we live in a culture and a society that's more and more complex and difficult to operate in. Many other factors having to do with, where we grew up and how we grew up. Those are also factors that condition us in that way. And really, these interventions that we're going to be sharing here as a group today are about letting go, literally, of some of that deep, mindless conditioning that causes us to react in ways that become automatic, that become mindless, versus cultivating a practice of being present in your life wherein you can respond to the sensations in your body, ride the waves of the sensation in the way that are responsive and sustainable over time.
You ride the wave. So if you're hurting, if you're physically hurting, you deal with that. You don't try to rid your body of that, but you transition through it.
Yeah, you transition through it, you awaken to it, you learn to be with it. Whatever arises shall also fall, right? If we give it an opportunity to fall. But the tendency is not to do that. The tendency is to reactively fall back into what we've always done, unsustainable kinds of behaviors when we're stressed, right? And again, thinking about the American Psychological Society, I think the number is 43% of all adults in this culture, because of stress, engage in behaviors that are adverse to their health, really. So can you imagine what some of those behaviors, reactive, mindless behaviors might be that contribute to people becoming unhealthy?
Okay, now is this when we do that, when we turn away from the problem, the issue we're facing, we don't address it, we don't try to overcome it, we start punishing ourselves through alcohol or foolish relationships or God knows what, overeating. Are we denying that we have a problem, or are we simply blocking it off? Or is it a little of both?
Well, I think it's a little both. I think it's difficult to face the reality of life. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. There's no escaping the challenge and the difficulty. The tendency is to want to run from the stress. But in fact, this practice, again, the practice that I'll introduce here this evening that we can all dive into together to some extent at least, is about opening to the stress versus reacting, as you suggested, Mark, rightly so. Alcohol is a huge problem in our culture, right? Washington County in the state of Wisconsin, along with many other kinds of behaviors. Screen time today, whether it take the form of a computer screen or a TV screen or a smartphone screen, all of these things are of course wonderful in some sense, but if it serves as an escape in your life, not allowing yourself to come into the stillness to reflect on what my body is attempting to communicate, it becomes very problematic.
Now, you refer to the yoga discipline that you share with your clients as mindful breath yoga. Mm-hmm. This is a special form of yoga. This is a special discipline of it. How does it work?
Well, as suggested in what you said, Mark, it starts with the breath. The breath is the bridge to the present moment of your life. It's one of the only bodily functions that we have control over, right? Conscious control over. Usually when we're breathing, it's entirely unconscious. We never think about it. But if we rest our attention on our breath, for example, right now as you sit in your chair, rest the attention on the breath at the base of the nose, where the nose attaches to the upper lip. and watch the breath, we're inviting ourselves to the present moment of our life. And we can begin with that. But it's all predicated on awareness. It all begins with awareness versus automatic reactivity. Defaulting to alcohol, defaulting to shopping, defaulting to working out at the gym excessively and injuring yourself, defaulting to all kinds of behaviors that are unhealthy and unsustainable.
And how does the control of our breath, the use of our breath, of course, women use this in Lamaze. It's like one of the core principles of Lamaze, right? But how does the special pattern of our breath, the use of our breath, how does it put us in a meditative state?
Well, you can work with the breath in a variety of ways to access a meditative state, but far before that, it begins with pure awareness of the breath, right?
The present moment.
The present moment.
You put yourself, so when you're breathing in a certain pattern, right here, if you were to do that, what would you be focusing on here in the room?
Well, in terms of the practice that I'll share tonight, it's about focusing your attention, resting your attention very lightly on the breath at the base of your nose.
You're thinking of the breath. You're thinking of where it's coming from.
Not so much thinking of the breath as experiencing the breath in this moment. It's really about letting go of thought. Right?
Can you give us an example? I'm really curious.
Well, maybe an example would be simply this. Let me just take this bell. I'm going to ring the bell, and when you no longer hear the sound of the bell, raise your hand. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to invite the audience to why did you raise your hand. The example is what allowed you to raise your hand when you no longer heard the bell was awareness. You weren't thinking about the Packers playing at 7:30 this evening. I invited Aaron Rodgers to come, he didn't show up, right? So what allowed you to raise your hand was pure awareness that the bell sound was no longer present.
As the sound of the bell escaped the room, I became more conscious of my breath, of breathing. Why was that?
Maybe because you were just more in tune to this moment, right?
And why is it important to focus on current time? What's happening around you now, not tomorrow, not something that happened earlier today at the office? Why is it important to become centered in real time?
Well, the past is done. The past is gone. Not that we can't have a fond memory of the past, but typically when people get stuck in the past, it's rumination, right? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. You tend to be harsh with yourself. If only I had done this or that, right? So there's not much sense in living in the past or attempting to be there, although we often get stuck there. In terms of the future, well, that's not yet here, right? But yet we can get caught up worrying intensely about the future to the point of it being literally debilitating, fraught with anxiety, right? I tried to think not too much today about coming here this evening and sitting in front of these cameras. I decided to just show up and be present and have this conversation with
So
you.
if we're living in the moment, it's incumbent upon us to be truly fulfilled, to maximize that moment.
Well, the moment is all we have, right? This is it, right now.
So
right now, this moment.
But if we're home washing dishes,
Yeah.
we should enjoy that moment? Because
Completely.
that is the moment where we can actually have control of our lives?
Absolutely, and you referenced enjoying washing the dishes. I don't want the group here this evening or the viewers that will watch this later to think this is all about joy in life, because life unfolds in every form, right? Sometimes it's joyful, and sometimes it's awful, in profound kinds of ways, right? The skill is to be present for whatever shows up, whether it's joyful or whether it's difficult to be with. Again, life is challenging, life is difficult. It's cultivating with a present moment awareness practice, with the practice of being mindful, grounded in the breath, that we can ride the waves of the energy. This is a practice. When people first come into the practice, Mark, they struggle intensely because to arrive in stillness, all the monsters show up, right? Many monsters show up. However, with practice and some guidance, confidence grows, benefits begin to accrue that become self-motivating to be still and to discover ways of being still and resources that you have to respond to your life in ways that are healthy versus reacting to life, alcohol, shopping, screen time, overeating, what have you. So it's cultivating a practice, key word is practice, a practice of being present in a way that's healthy and sustainable.
To what degree, if we learn this discipline and truly begin living our lives in the daily moment, and challenges come up, to what degree do we begin to enjoy overcoming our daily challenges, turning a bad day into a good day, and becoming good at achieving obstacles?
Well,
overcoming obstacles.
As I suggested a moment ago, the practice becomes self-motivating. This practice is something that I encourage people to engage in daily, every day. And as you do become more joyful, even in the face of many difficulties.
Because the challenge almost becomes excitement. I can do this.
I can do this. I can ride the wave of the difficulty in my life without having to resort to behaviors that are destructive, unsustainable, and very injurious to health over time. Right?
As opposed to when one is battling anxiety, depression, and the challenges almost become burdensome, a curse, and you don't have the tools to even face them.
Right.
You don't have the tools, you don't know how to not only face them, but how to overcome them.
Well, in the culture we live in, many of the interventions around issues like depression and anxiety come from without the individual, from outside the individual, right? In the form of medication, for example. Nothing wrong with medication. However, there are many other resources that people have within their own abilities as a human being to respond to what's happening in their life in a way that's healthy and sustainable.
If one is embracing the discipline of yoga when trying to come out of anxiety, depression, the medication bridge that a doctor might prescribe to you to get you to that next phase of your life, if you embrace yoga along with it, does that lessen the dependency on the medication? Does that, in some cases, negate the need for medication?
Well, you use the word bridge. I think that's the way I've experienced it with many different clients that I've worked with over the years. Coming into this practice, using medication to have some semblance of balance in their life. And as they deepen into a yogic practice, and I need to be careful in terms of a yogic practice, it's very broad in terms of what people can do yogically to respond to their life in a way that will be healthy. The key is to practice it every day, right? It doesn't have to be a vigorous vinyasa yoga practice in order to experience real benefits from yoga in being still and being mindful.
Share with us some of the poses and some of the meditative discipline that
well,
you're
I can
talking
do
about.
that. We'll do a very simple pose here together, okay? The group is kind of compact, so maybe just move your chairs apart a little bit so you have a little space next to your neighbor. That would be great. So the posture we're going to engage in is just a simple seated mountain posture, about as basic as you can get in yoga. I'm standing, so I could do standing mountain posture, the most basic of all yoga postures. Great, everybody's got a little space. So coming into seated mountain, stack your knees right over your ankles in a straight line, and maybe your feet are about hip width apart. And here are your sits bones. Drop your sits bones deep into your chair, and then very gently tuck your chin, and have a sense of length through the crown of your head, so as to lengthen your spine subtly. lengthening the spine. Notice your shoulders now. Soften your shoulders. And allow the softness of the shoulders to radiate down the arms, through your elbows and your wrists. And now your fingers and your palms become very soft. And you're seated now in mountain. And notice your eyes. Soften your eyes. Allow the eyes to look towards the earth, inviting a natural relaxation response. Soften the face. And as best you can, invite your body to be as perfectly still as it can be. And notice now, with a sense of kindness towards yourself, whatever thoughts are present in your mind. No matter what the thought is, just notice whatever thought is present in your mind. And as best you can, let the thoughts go without any judgment. And drop your awareness now to rest on your breath at the very base of your nose, where the nose attaches to the upper lip. And at that location, pay attention to your breath, pure breath awareness. Resting your attention so lightly as a butterfly rests on a flower. And as you watch the breath, relax your body more fully, more completely. And as you relax your body, invite a sense of witnessing yourself in mountain posture, sitting strong and tall and confident. And feel what's present, no matter what it is. No judgment about it, just feel what's present in the form of sensation in your body, in the form of energy moving, what's ever there. Watch it as closely as you can with great interest. And allow it to be just as it is, nothing to fix. It's a practice of breathe, relax, feel, watch, and allow. Breathe, relax, feel, watch, and allow. This is the bridge to beginning to form a true friendship with your body, with your mind, and with your spirit, riding the waves of whatever might arise, responsively, staying present. In a moment, I'll ring a bell, and when you hear the bell, take all the time you like before you come back into the room fully and completely. No hurry, take your time. So this is just an introduction, Mark, to a very basic yoga posture, seated mountain. Anybody can do it, right? So many people are ill-equipped to come into a yoga class for all kinds of different reasons, right? But that doesn't mean in any way whatsoever that they are not capable of assuming postures, yogic postures, that are intended to empower them Posture informs perception, and perception informs posture, right? They go hand in hand. How often do you see people, and this informs their life, right? Versus people who are sitting in a posture that's erect, or like a mountain, right? This informs how they begin to think about themselves and how they experience their life.
Well, they say that the doctors, as soon as they walk in a room, patient room, and get ready for an annual exam or whatever, they can pretty much pick up on the attitude of the given patient based on his or her posture before the exam even begins.
Sure, there's absolute truth in that, no doubt about it. So again, what we practice, and I'll underscore this key word again, practice, 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 that begins to fill the screen of our life. So I had these folks who showed up tonight and didn't stay home to watch the Packer game, sit in Seated Mountain. Do we want to have any feedback what that was like for them? What are you thinking?
I would love to do that before I go in the audience, and perhaps we could do that in tandem with you.
Sure.
Joe has come up with a beautiful 4 or 5 sentence, and pardon me if I'm expressing it differently than you are. I call it a mission statement on self-awareness. But it's a beautiful thought that Joe shared with me on email a few days ago in preparation for our program together, where he breaks down a statement on what he has entitled the statement is a true friendship.
Right.
Before we get into that, you are very honest with your clients and on your website about how yoga brought you out of depression a number of years ago. And when you're reaching out to your clients, you're not doing it as an instructor and as a consultant, as a therapist. You're expressing your knowledge, professional knowledge, based in a large degree through personal experience. You walk this walk. You know what this is like.
Well, I have walked this walk, and I'm glad you brought up the notion of, working with people. I think this process is really a collaborative process. My preference would be not to be sitting on the stage, right? My preference would to be in the group, interacting. And
now, are you joking here? Or are you serious? Are you nervous in this setting?
Oh no, I'm fine. I'm comfortable. I'm just saying my way of normally working is much more collaborative with folks. It's not a top-down kind of a thing, in any fashion or any form. It's a shared experience. I benefit, they benefit, right?
You reached out to yoga, though, to bring yourself back up.
Absolutely.
And how did you even trust yoga enough to do that for you? Why did you reach out to that discipline, Joe?
Well, I don't think it was a real conscious thing. I just discovered a yoga class quite spontaneously out of the newspaper, maybe the Hartford Booster. A gentleman here in Washington County has been teaching for a long time. I forget his name now. Van Dyke, maybe. Anyway, he was advertising in the paper, and I just went to his class. And his first class just moved me, period.
What was it about it, Joe, that just grabbed you, that really connected you with this
Well, I
approach?
think the stillness coupled with the movement, breath awareness, a sense of consciousness. And thereafter, I began to dive more deeply into yoga and what it had to offer.
Yeah.
And over time, over 15 years now, it's infused my psychotherapy practice completely in terms of working with folks.
I mean, your practice is truly, you hear the expression integrated medicine, but you really are practicing integrated medicine with counseling, verbal counseling, and incorporating that with the poses and with the breathing, and you are a holistic teacher.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think my practice has developed over time more and more deeply into that.
I would love to talk about this beautiful summary that you composed for us. Let me go out in the audience, because I think that as you read it line by line, Joe, folks in the audience are going to think you're talking about them, because it has that power within it, where it just kind of strikes a very personal chord for, I think, anyone who's walked this earth. Let me go out in the audience. I'd love to get some folks interacting with you, maybe as you're referring to it. So I think,
okay.
John, you have a microphone for me, sir? Okay, I'm going to go around here. And the title of it, Joe, is a true friendship, right?
That's correct. That's correct. A true friendship, really, this practice is about developing with yourself a true friendship grounded in compassion towards oneself, kindness towards oneself, versus how we tend to react at other times, which is to be harsh with ourselves or overly judgmental.
And oftentimes we hear from experts, you have to love yourself before you can love anybody else.
Well,
this is a form of that to some degree.
Very much so. Very much so. So it begins, Mark, I begin with this opening, and this is not an original idea, right? This has been around for 1,000 years. I open with life is difficult, life is challenging. Just about the time you believe you have a handle on things and you are in for a smooth ride, the wheels fall off. Has anybody ever had that experience? Huh?
Okay, I'm going to go in the audience here. This one lady in the purple dress is nodding her head. Would you stand up for just 1 second? Absolutely. Absolutely. Share your first name with me if you would. And pardon me for reaching across you.
Beth.
Beth, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay, you were nodding your head when you talked about the wheels falling off. Why were you nodding your head?
Because my life,
You can look over there. There we go.
my life went through a complete transformation, I could say, through a divorce, and that was the wheels falling off for me.
And many of us have been there. It's not fun, but you, one day at a time, right?
Going through it, yep, getting through it. And that's life.
And how did you get through it? Looking back on it now, how did you get through it?
A day at a time. And I also practice yoga.
And I'm sure you have a lot. You're very kind to stand up and share that with us. Thank you very much. Joe, I know a lot of your clients are going through separation, divorce. What is it about yoga that can help us focus and just move forward?
Well, I think the young lady who shared her thoughts is a perfect example of that, right? Divorce is a very difficult process for anyone to go through. A yoga practice provides an opportunity for an individual on an everyday basis to show up on their yoga mat. And if that's all they do is show up and sit on their yoga mat, they showed up in their life, right? They invited themselves to be present. And that is a step in the right direction. Cultivating a sense of awareness enough to show up on your mat and pay attention consciously. Yoga at its core is about being conscious in how you live your life. Many people who get divorced are running, escaping, versus being present in their life, right? So yoga provides a resource every day for you to go to, literally on the bounds of the mat. I should have brought a mat so I could roll it out here tonight. I should have had foresight enough to do that.
You know, quite often from folks who hear the expression, Joe, I never saw it coming. Now, this doesn't just relate to divorce, but, you know, any challenge that life presents us. You know, as you said in the opening sentence of your summary on self-awareness, just when things are going right and you're feeling confident about yourself, the wheels come off. Why do we not see a potential problem down the road coming, whether it's our car breaking down on the way to work, or getting fired, or gaining 40 pounds after we knew better than to go on an eating binge? Why do we set ourselves up?
Well, I don't think it's so much a matter of setting ourselves up, Mark. I think that our preference as human beings, consciously or unconsciously, is to attach to pleasure, right? We want things to be pleasant. But guess what? That's always temporary. I don't care what form the pleasure takes, it's always temporary. Life has another side to it, which is difficult and challenging, right? So we shouldn't be surprised when the wheels fall off, because certainly they will.
Can I ask members of the audience here, who among you, maybe within the last few weeks or something, had something arise in your lives that you didn't see coming, and you were totally blindsided by it? Can I have a show of hands? How many? Okay, Julie, you're on. I'm going to get to you. Hang on just 1 second. Come around here. Could you stand up for a second, Julie? I'm just going to cut across right here. And we're working this camera right over here. Oh, you've already got a microphone. So what happened to you?
Well, something happened at work, and I wasn't expecting it, and it made me reassess the way I reacted to things.
made you reassess what happened to things, such as?
Well, you know, when things happen, only you can control what you do.
Absolutely.
So I had to think about what I could do to change the situation.
Joe, how do we better address that? Thank you, Julie, very much. How do we better address a situation like that?
Well, I think, as the young lady said, being aware of who has the problem in that example, right? She said she stepped back and reflected and thought of ways that she could address that might have been more helpful in some fashion or some form. Again, stepping back, reflecting, taking time is, I think, the important piece.
Can we continue
Sure.
reading on into your summary?
Sure, the summary goes on and simply says, when life pushes you around in this way, the human tendency is to become reactive. And in the reactivity, you turn on yourself by judging yourself harshly and acting out in ways that are unhealthy and unsustainable. So this is something we're all capable of doing, right? And probably have done many times. When things don't go well, we blame ourselves, we become harsh with ourselves, we begin to react versus respond. We begin to react in ways that are unhealthy and unsustainable. As I mentioned earlier, the APA suggested that 43% of all adults in the country, in America, are afflicted by health problems as a consequence of acting out reactively when they're stressed or feeling anxious or overwhelmed. So it comes as no surprise that these unsustainable behaviors are going to cause individuals to break down over time.
And Joe, how do we go about changing that pattern so that we're not doing that?
Well, I think the antidote to that is exactly what I invited the group into just a few moments ago, right? A few moments ago, I had everybody sit in seated mountain. I could have taken more time to embellish what a mountain is about, right? I could do that now. If you assume the posture of seated mountain, like this, great, people are doing that, right? They're doing that. They're already moving. So this is consciously beginning to take a posture which informs the perception of your life. And what do we know about mountains, right? They've been around for, I don't know, 1 million years. And in 1 million years, they've been present for the most beautiful fall days one can imagine, with, you know, birds singing and flowers blooming and pleasant aromas arising. And it's beautiful. And the mountain stands and is present for that. Another day comes, and it's a thunderstorm, or it's a tornado, or it's a flood, or it's chaotic in some form. But the mountain continues to stand. So you are the mountain, right? So whatever shows up in your life, in the flow of your life, the flow never ceases. It's continual, and it's not always bliss. It's many times very difficult to be with. Learning to ride the waves of those ever-changing currents is the key to this practice. This very simple practice of being seated in mountain and paying attention to your breath, moment by moment. And as you attempt to do that, what will happen is your mind will drag you away, powerfully so, and then you get reactive. God, I'll never get this right. But don't be reactive. Ground yourself in the breath. Be kind to yourself. Be a good friend, a true friend to yourself in those moments where the energy is ramping up, right? Be a true friend to yourself and come back and rest in the breath. And be with what is. That's the core of the practice, Mark.
Now, sometimes we have time in the office, the workplace, or at home, even the neighborhood, to do something like that. But sometimes when we're meeting a challenge in our daily lives, we're expected to have an immediate reaction, an immediate answer if we're in a dialogue with someone, for example, and we can't do something like that. You know, when we meet a challenge in our daily lives, when we're literally on the run, going from appointment to appointment or meeting to meeting, how would we deal with something like that if it just smacks us in the face and we don't have time, any private time?
Well, you think you don't have time, right? I would say I would break this practice into, on one hand, a formal practice, and on the other hand, an informal practice. So the formal practice takes the form of showing up on your yoga mat, if you're into that, or it takes the practice of finding your sits bones and coming into seated mountain and setting a timer for 5 minutes so you aren't looking at the clock and trusting the timer will go off in 5 minutes. And you drop into seated mountain and paying attention to the breath. Breathe, relax, feel, watch, allow. Whatever is arising, ride the wave of that energy. And you become more skilled at sitting in this formal way, yes? So now when you're out in the real world, and this is your question, I think, Mark, when it smacks you in the face, you have a formal practice. So when you see that smack hit you in the gut, or your shoulders get tense, or your fists begin to clench, or now it's my jaw, you can take a breath and connect with the breath at the base of your nose, right?
We're talking quality time. Doesn't have to be 15 minutes.
Pardon?
It doesn't have to be 15
Oh,
minutes.
no.
We're
It
talking
can
about
happen in an
quality time.
instant. It can happen in an instant. So now I have the thread of the breath in the present moment, and now I feel my feet more firmly on the earth. And now I decide to soften my belly and deepen my breath and extend my exhalation, which is inviting the parasympathetic nervous system to engage. And there's a sense of calmness that comes. And in the calmness, we respond to whatever is smacking us in the face versus reacting to it in some ways that would only make matters worse, right? And we've all done that. So the formal practice informs the informal practice. I make many suggestions to folks that I work with. When you leave Slinger tonight, there's not a stop and go light. It's four-way stop down there, isn't it? But when you come to your next stop and go light and it's red and you have to wait, drop into your breath. Feel your sits bones in the seat of the car. Practice, right? Practice being present. You lead a busy life and you have kids at home and you work all day and you're tired and you have to fix supper and get ready for the next day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's never done, right? So before you enter the house and your hand is on the doorknob, you pause and you do a doorknob meditation, right? For just a moment. Hand remains on the doorknob. You fall into your breath at the base of the nose where the nose attaches to the upper lip. You ground your feet more firmly on the earth. You give yourself a moment to be still before you enter what should be, your sanctuary. And I think you have a different experience when you come through the door if you can develop those kinds of practices. And there's no end to where you can do this informally in your life, right? And I think the formal practice very much informs the informal practice, right?
Allison, this is good stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
Well,
And
would
I
you
have
stand up? You have a
for
question?
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I had the chance of meeting with Joe and talking about this process. We talked about how do you prepare yourself when you know you're going to be going into what could be a very stressful meeting at work. What is it that you can do to prepare yourself so that you're not raked with anxiety? And you had talked about holding onto that handle just before you go in the door, getting ready for that. And how do you respond or how do you prepare and react if someone comes at you assertively or aggressively? And if any of us have worked, we know there have been those times when people come screaming at you and you need to not react inappropriately or match what they're doing. How can you do that using some of the things that you're talking about today?
Well, Allison, aggressively, like somebody coming after me physically. More verbally. Physically, if you're a therapist in a regular practice seeing people all day long, you fashion your room and you set your chair in a place that if you got to get out of the room, you get out of the room, right? That's one example. However, I think the important thing in my work is to be able to hold the space with people with whatever emotions they bring to the table, right? And sometimes it's very intense for people, whether it's grief or anger or anxiety or fear, all these darker, more difficult emotions to manage, it's my responsibility to be able to hold that space. So if it's getting a bit chaotic in the way that you were suggesting, well, I drop into my breath, right? I drop into, pardon?
While they're yelling?
Of course, of course. I mean,
I'm sorry,
people
while
yell.
they're yelling at you, you
People
just
yell.
sort of, hold on a minute.
I don't have to,
Yeah, I know,
nobody
you don't have to
knows.
say that.
Nobody knows that I'm paying attention to my breath, or I'm
Sure.
grounding my feet, or I'm moving up in my chair, or I might pace them to cross their legs or cross their arms, or I'll allow them, you know. Breathe, relax, feel, watch, allow is the mantra of this presentation, right? Breathe, relax, feel, watch, allow. Allow. Whatever goes up must come down, right?
Okay, I'm going to try that.
You could have a yoga standoff.
I mean, I think, Allison, in those situations, many times what arises is a sense of urgency, but in fact, there's nothing urgent. I mean, nobody's getting hurt. I checked that a moment ago. I said I position myself if I have to get out of the room. In 30 years, I left the room twice maybe, right? So my point is, it's not urgent. We tend to elevate things to urgency when in fact it's completely unnecessary.
So one of the things you do have control of in a situation like that is set the rhythm in the room.
Pace and lead, pace and lead, pace and lead, pace and lead.
And that's a lot of, I mean, that's pretty powerful in itself.
It is. It is. I mean, that's the role I have to play every day, and so do you, in some sense, if you're working with people in a classroom or in a yoga studio or as an administrator or whatever your job is. It is about showing up mindfully in awareness and working with people in ways that are grounded, right, and intentional. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Allison.
Joe, could you read on a little bit more of your summary?
Yeah,
great
where did I
stuff.
leave off here?
I think we're talking about when the wheels come
So
off.
what I
isn't it?
said was an effective way to interrupt this unhealthy, unconscious pattern, this reactive pattern, is to develop a practice of a true friendship with your body, with your emotions, with your mind, with your perceptions. Cultivate a true friendship with your body, your mind, your emotions, your perceptions, rather than dismiss them, right? Breathe, relax, feel, watch, allow. Do it formally in seated mountain so that when you're in the real world, you know, interacting with your spouse or your kids or your family or your friends or your coworkers or people in the community, so that you can engage in the practice there, informally. And there's no end to practicing. Tonight when you go home and brush your teeth, be aware that you're brushing your teeth, right? Feel every tooth, right? Be aware that you're washing the dishes. Be present. Practice being present versus being reactive, which is mindless, and I call it habit energy. We've done what we've always done, right? Quite automatically, it happens. We're deeply conditioned in these ways. Yoga is very much about deconditioning what we've always done. It's a letting go. It's a peeling away of the onion and exposing really the core of who you really are, which I think is probably pretty sweet. So again, the key to interrupting this unhealthy, unsustainable pattern, once again, is your breath. If there's anything I hope you take from the presentation tonight is that the breath is the bridge to the present moment of your life. So when I lead a yoga class, you know, if I stand in Tadasana, mountain posture, the breath begins first, right? That's our true friend. That's the invitation to the present moment of your life. And as I exhale, now I release. So I always lead with the breath in my yoga practice, inhale and exhale. And that informs releasing my body, softening my body. So the breath is really the ground of what we're talking about, because it's the bridge, it's the anchor to the present moment of your life, and it's always with you, no matter where you are, no matter what the situation is, how joyful or how difficult. The breath is always there, guaranteed. Please.
Let me get a microphone to you. Hang on just one second. And we'll be looking right over in this direction. Yes, ma'am.
So I've meditated for a long, long time in my life, and I've done this. But I've also read many, many places that it's very beneficial to think of the exhalation as the first part of the cycle.
Sure.
So
Sure.
you agree with that? I just wondered whether you felt the same way.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's different techniques, different individuals who might instruct meditation have different methods. That's a fine method to begin on the exhalation. The exhalation informs the inhalation.
Mm-hmm.
The inhalation will be more full, more complete if we begin with the exhalation.
Mm-hmm.
The exhalation is related to softening, letting go, right? And that's at the core of this practice too. Letting go, softening.
I found an easy way to do that is to create something that I would say that fit exhalation, inhalation.
Yeah.
And I use that because then I always start with the exhalation.
Do you want to share it?
Oh, I don't know. It's religious.
It's okay.
Okay, my God who loves me, heal me with your breath. So my
Beautiful.
God who loves me is the exhalation.
Right.
Heal me with your breath or with your spirit. I
Right.
say one or the other.
Right.
Is when I inhale. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah,
And,
it's beautiful, and what I like about it is it's grounded in your belief system, right?
Sure.
It works very well for you, and I think that's the important piece, that we're all unique, and we should all engage in these practices in ways that make sense to us. There's no one prescription that fits all. So thank you so much for sharing.
Good for you. And can I ask what drew you to yoga?
Pardon?
What drew you to yoga, to the practice?
I think I actually developed meditation without knowing anything about it. And probably came out of Lamaze. 'Cause I
Lamaze.
did it
Yeah.
way back.
Okay.
From that point, possibly. And I at one point had thyroid. I had hyperthyroidism.
Yeah.
And I used breath, and I actually got over it. I've never had it again.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the
great.
Lamaze. When you think back to that time in your life, did you experience that as calming?
Yes. Well, I had 2 natural births, completely natural from it.
Yeah.
So,
So it was
yes,
calming.
So you really were good at this.
I was good at this.
The
yes,
reason,
I was good at
the
this.
reason I'm asking you that question is because if you experience that as calming, earlier I said these practices become self-motivating. So maybe way back when you were giving birth, it was calming, and naturally you just carried it forward into your life because you know what? It
Not
worked for me.
Part though.
Pardon?
Not the,
Oh, I see, not that part
Part
so much. Okay.
that doesn't
okay.
work.
So Joe, thank you for sharing that. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you
So
so
Joe,
much.
you give your students a certain amount of freedom to really adjust the different techniques to what suits them best.
Oh, I think absolutely. I think that's what I meant earlier, Mark, when I said the practice is collaborative. It's me interacting with the person I'm working with in such a way that it's a match, if you will, or consistent with a belief system or their way of living, that it works for them, that it's something they can, in a meaningful way, carry forward in their life.
Darren Siegriest is with us, and he's the district manager here. From Darren, thank you so much for your hospitality. Could you stand up for just 1 second? Thank you so much. Darren is the district manager for Slinger Public Schools. I guess an administrator could use this stuff in dealing with young people every day, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think certainly you never know what each day will hold for a day in the life of a school district, and so I think all of us to be as calm and in touch with your positive side and friend with yourself works well in our profession as well.
How many of your students are perhaps attracted to this discipline or talking about it or using it, or, I mean, how big is...
Honestly, that would be a hard thing to quantify, but I do know, even in our own curriculum, within our physical education instruction, we're trying to embrace far more wellness for life in our instructional practices and things of that nature. So I think we're trying to open up that awareness to students about caring for themselves into adulthood every day.
That's wonderful. And congratulations to you on the great stuff that's happening here at Slinger High School.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you. How long does it take us, Joe, to get good at this? I mean, if someone starts to embrace this discipline, this lifestyle through yoga, through meditative thought, through proper breathing, you could easily get frustrated and maybe try it for a couple of weeks and then drop it, but I mean, to get good at it, to really make it part of your daily life, how long does it take until you can embrace it on a daily basis? And we only have 1 minute left here.
Well, as I said, ideally, it's something you practice nearly every day. I think if you practice for a month or two, consistently, steady, you'll become increasingly more skilled over time. But it's a lifelong practice, really, right? And I mentioned earlier, Mark, and I think it's really important to emphasize this with the little time we have left. Initially, these practices are very difficult because when we move into stillness, as I said, the monsters show up, and the tendency is to want to run out of the room. However, with practice, you can learn to ride the waves of those sensations in a ways that will be very helpful for you.
And Joe, you have been a marvelous guest. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure pursuing this topic. It's been a pleasure being here in Slinger School District, and we hope you at home enjoy our next episode of Next Avenue Community Conversation. Good night.